night, you know that my husband gave the keynote address, and he did a pretty good job, right? So after that, I was saying to him, you know, I'm a little worried, honey. And he said, why? And I said, because I don't know exactly what I should say or whether I have enough material to last 20 minutes. And he looks at me and he said, well, you never don't talk enough. Now, we're newlyweds. We have been married for about a year and a half. And he was, thank you. He was single for 46 years before that, but I realized with that comment that he has learned a tremendous amount about being a husband in this 18 months, because that was a husbandly way of saying, baby, you talk too much. You don't have to worry about this one. So, in deference to that, I will try to keep my comments crisp. So I have 4 things that I think hopefully will be helpful to you as we as a charter movement in this state move into the next 20 years. The first is this, and this is actually a piece of advice that I got from a mentor of mine, Joel Klein, who used to be the chancellor of the New York City Public Schools. So you may not know this, but when the District of Columbia Public Schools was thinking about, having mayoral control of the schools, et cetera, the mayor went to New York to see how that model was working. And Mayor Fenty said to Joel Klein, I need you to find me the person who's going to be the chancellor of this district, et cetera. And so Joel Klein actually recommended me for that job. And as I was getting pummeled every single day, he felt sorry for me and bad that he had gotten me into that situation. So he always used to, take care of me as much as he could. So I remember one day in my first 3 months on the job, I was late at night, it's raining, I'm driving home from work, and my phone rings. So I look at the phone, it says Joel Klein. So I, pull my car over to the side of the road, I pick up the phone and I said, yes, sir. And he says, hey, how you doing? I said, I'm doing okay, I'm hanging in there. He's like, okay, good. So I called you tonight because I have 2 pieces of advice for you. And I said, okay, I'm ready. He said, the first one, do you have a boyfriend? And I said, no, sir, I do not, because at the time I didn't. He said, okay, so my first piece of advice is go out and get one. Now, I never thought that I would be taking love life advice from Joel Klein. And I said, okay. And he said, and let me tell you why. He said, this is the loneliest job that a person could possibly have. Day in and day out, you're getting yelled at, you're being criticized, all these things. He said, the only way that I survive every day is because I have my wife. And when we get into bed at the end of the night, she says, honey, don't worry about that. You're good. They're the crazy ones. You're not crazy. He's like, so go and find a boyfriend. And you'll note that I listened to his advice. And now I have somebody every night in bed who's, baby, don't worry. They're crazy, not you. The second thing that he said, though, is I said, okay, I got it. And then he said, here's my second piece of advice. He said, you have to lead from the front. And he said it with such conviction, and he's a super smart guy, and I didn't want to be dumb, and so I said, okay, I understand. And then I hung up the phone, and I got back on the road, I was like, I have no idea what that means. And it actually wasn't until a few weeks later, when we were going through the whole school closure process, and literally the whole city was up in arms, that I realized what the chancellor was talking about. Because if you get caught up and mired in the muck of, we don't want you to do this, we don't want you to do that, and you lose sight of the fact that as a leader, sometimes you have to make decisions that other people can't see right then, but is going to benefit your school, your district, et cetera, in the long term, you have to be willing to take the lead spot in that. And because we persevered through that, we were able to create an environment where every school in the district, because we did the school closures, had an art teacher, a music teacher, a PE teacher, a librarian, a nurse, and a guidance counselor or social worker for the first time in the history of the city. So it is worth it to take this position. And I say this to you as a charter movement because while California is home to some of the most outstanding charter schools in this entire nation. As a state, we are not just not leading from the front and not just bringing up the rear, but in some cases we're heading in the opposite direction. And let me elucidate this for you. 38 states across the country have agreed to adopt President Obama's framework around teacher evaluations that ensures that a significant part of the teacher evaluation is based on how much your students grow. 38 states have agreed to do this. 11 states are holding out and want to maintain the status quo. One state, California, last year introduced legislation that would have made it illegal to count student growth as part of a teacher's evaluation. Given that our legislature is trying to move us in the other direction, it is incumbent upon this community to continue to move the ball forward. And I know how hard it is. You all get beat down every single day. You have legislation being introduced that will take away the very little that you have. So in that environment and in that circumstance, it's hard to think about leading from the front when you're just trying to maintain the status quo. But I guarantee you that we will see greater gains and more movement in the long run if we take a more aggressive stance and we lead from the front. So that's my first point. My second point is this. It is okay not to be liked. And I speak from a whole lot of experience on this one. In fact, when I was in Washington, D.C., when we were going through all the fights and the trials and the tribulations, a columnist for the Washington Post wrote an article. And the sort of premise of the article was, I like Michelle Rhee and what she is doing. She's, making the right decisions for kids. I just wish she would be a little nicer. So I read the piece. What is this guy talking about? So I call him up afterwards. I was like, what are you doing? And he said, well, look, the thing is, I want you to stay around for a really long time. I think you are doing good things for kids. He's like, but can you just not be just a little friendlier and nicer along the way? And I said, here's the thing. You need to figure out what you think the characteristics of a good school's chancellor are. And if you think that warm and fuzzy are the most important things, then you should actually be advocating for your ouster. Because if you want warm and fuzzy, I am not your girl. I said, however, if you like what's going on, if you know that the hard decisions that have been avoided for years are actually now being made and these are the right decisions for kids, then you should be advocating not for me to change my personality, but for people to get over our personality differences and focus on what is happening that is in the best interest of children. So how does this apply to you? I'm about to tell you. Many of you run excellent charter schools. You are out there defying the odds and showing people what is possible that, quite frankly, 10 years ago, this country didn't think was doable, which is you're taking some of the most challenging environments on low-income, minority kids, and you are ensuring that they are achieving at the same high levels. This is truly something that 10, 20 years ago was not happening. You are doing that. However, you're also sort of doing this and say, well, let me just do my work. Let me just improve on what my school is doing. And you're turning a blind eye to the fact that there's a charter school down the street that's doing a crappy job with kids. And in your mind, you're thinking, well, but why enter into the fray of a debate? As long as I do a good job in my school, that's enough. It is not enough. Let me tell you that until the charter community takes the lead on accountability and makes sure that we are holding one another accountable to ensure that we are closing down failing charter schools, this movement will never reach its potential. You have to be okay with not being liked. My third point is the need for the charter movement to innovate. And I'm gonna tell you a quick story on this one. So I used to be out in the schools a lot when I was in DC. And after the first couple of weeks, what I realized was that my assistant, who was scheduling all of my meetings, et cetera, was, she had done this for previous superintendents, and so what happened was she would call the school ahead of time and say, the chancellor is coming, et cetera, and I'd pull up into the parking lot, and I was met by the marching band and the pep squad, with the dog and pony show, and so after a while I was really realizing that this is not what I wanted to see, right? I don't want to see the show, I want to actually see what's going on in classrooms every day. So I took to going on unannounced visits. So even though my schedule might say you got 3 meetings, I would just cancel them at a moment's notice and go out to a school. Now this didn't sit well with some people. So I remember one particular day I went to one of the lowest performing schools in one of the most downtrodden communities in Washington, D.C. And I walk into the building and I'm sort of, going from classroom to classroom, and I'm hearing, as I'm sort of traveling around, this weird buzz, like people are talking. It's like, what's going on? And I was trying to figure out, and I knew it had something to do with the fact that maybe I was in the building. And it was the fact that these folks had gotten smart to the fact that I would do these unannounced visits. So when they had devised a plan that when I walked into the building, they would announce to each other, "The dragon is in the lair. The dragon is in the lair." So they start, calling all the teachers on their phone, "The dragon is in the lair." So I'm walking up one staircase and literally almost bump smack dab into the principal, who's running down the other staircase, looking behind him, screaming, "The dragon is in the lair." So we run into each other, and he's like, "Oh, Chancellor," and I was like, "Dragon?" This school, as I said, was one of the lowest performing schools in the entire city. The proficiency levels were in the single digits. And quite frankly, there wasn't a lot of hope. We didn't have a plan for what we were going to do. And you have to realize at the time, I'm trying to fix the central office bureaucracy. I'm trying to make sure the air conditioners are working and that people are getting paid and that we're not out of compliance with the federal government. We're trying to negotiate the teachers' union contract. I literally did not have the capacity and the resources necessary to be able to figure out a plan for how we were going to turn this school around. The fortunate thing was that I had partners. So we put out an RFP nationally to ask people with a specific emphasis on charter providers to come in and help us turn around some of our failing schools. The vast majority of the high-performing charter management organizations didn't actually want to do it. Not because they didn't want to help kids or be in DC or anything like that. They were just saying, this is not our model. Our model is to start with first grade and grow up every year. You have a failing school with 500 kids in it right now. That is not how we roll. We were incredibly fortunate to have a young group of educators who had started a great school in Philadelphia called Scholar Academies. And they weren't a huge charter management organization, didn't have a ton of experience, but the schools that they had started were knocking it out of the park. These people came to DC and said, "I am absolutely willing to take this on. Here's what we need. We've never done this before, we don't know, but it's enough of an inspiration to us to try." They took over the school. I allowed them to hire all new teachers, run the program that they wanted to run. First year, results were relatively flat. In the second year, they tripled the proficiency rates in math and doubled the proficiency rates in reading to see the largest percentage test score gains in the entire city. You have to be willing to engage with the district, to think outside the box, to do things that you haven't done before, because you know what needs to happen, and you see that better than the bureaucracy does. And so when it comes to innovating, you're in the best position to do that, and a much better position oftentimes than the district is. So that's the third. The last one, and this is very quick. So one of the things that I thought was most important when I was running the DC public schools was the fact that I was a mom. And I think more mothers should be superintendents, because we wouldn't have the nonsense going on, trust me, that we do today. And let me tell you why. we had put in place a new teacher evaluation system in DC. And we were having this whole policy discussion, right, about, well, what will the ramifications of the new evaluation system be, et cetera. And the biggest question that we had was, what do we do with teachers who are rated as being ineffective? And I had a lot of people on my staff who were arguing, well, if a teacher is not effective, it is our job and our sort of responsibility as the employer to invest in that employee, give them 3 or 4 years to try to improve their practice and get better. Like that's workforce development. And quite frankly, if you look at it from the perspective of an employer or a district or a system, that makes a whole lot of sense. But I was looking at things from the perspective of a mom who sent her 2 kids to the DC public schools. And what I thought was, if I am willing to take somebody who's been rated as ineffective and place them in the classroom next year, then I have to be okay knowing that one of my own 2 kids is going to be taught by that teacher next year. And let me tell you that there is no way that I would ever stand for that. No one in this room would ever stand for that. So how could I put any other mother in a position where she had to put her kids in the classroom of a teacher that I would never do, except for my own kids? It is amazing to me how public officials across this country make decisions completely divorced from their own reality. Another thing that we did in DC, we had a budget crunch, and we had to lay teachers off. And I decided that we were going to lay these teachers off by quality instead of seniority, which is what the district had done for many, many years. This was caused a huge firestorm throughout the city, right? And one of the public officials, one of the city council members said, this is a travesty. And I am demanding right now that you reinstate all 266 of the teachers that you have wrongfully dismissed. And I said to him, I'll tell you what, you have 4 kids that don't attend the DC public schools. If you bring one of your children back into the system and allow me to randomly assign them to one of these ineffective teachers that I just laid off, then I will give that person their job back. And if you bring 2 of your kids back, I'll bring 2 of the teachers back. All 4 of your kids, your cousins, your sisters, your brothers, your whoever, any people in your family that you are willing to put in the classroom of these ineffective teachers, I will bring 1 of those teachers back for every kid in your family. Needless to say, he did not take me up on that offer. The public officials in this country are all too willing to subject other people's children to a fate that they would never accept for their own. But we also have to ensure that that applies to ourselves. You all are out there running some unbelievable schools, but the bar has to be set high. It can't just be that you're running the school and getting better results than the school when you took it over. You can't just say it's better than the school down the street, because nobody in this room started a charter school so that you could be the same as the mediocre traditional public school a mile away. You cannot rest until your school is the exact kind of school that you want your own children to attend. We can't rest until that is what we are providing to all children. So let me just end on this note. I believe that public education is supposed to be the great equalizer in this country. It is supposed to be the thing that ensures that it doesn't matter if you're black or white, rich or poor. We have a public school system so that every child can live the American dream. If you work hard and you do the right thing, you can be successful. That is not, however, the reality that most of the children in this country face today. The reality in this state is that if you live in Beverly Hills versus if you live in Compton, you're getting 2 wildly different educational experiences. That is the biggest injustice imaginable. It goes against everything that we stand for as a country. So while you have done tremendous work over the last 20 years, I can tell you that what has to happen, the momentum, the progress, the achievement that sits ahead of us in the next 20 years is not only going to be harder, but it is going to be the only thing that ensures that we can live up to our ideals as Americans so that every kid in this country can get a great education.